Hi, and welcome to this telecast, this broadcast about some of the great books that are available here. And we have with us one of the award-winning authors from the Word Guild Awards this past year, and his name is Danny Covey. And Danny has written a most intriguing book, one that certainly captured my heart. And I use that term heart for a good reason because it's all about the heart, you might say. Uh, so, Danny, why don't you tell us? I should say Danny Covey. I'm not sure I gave that full name because I think it's important to have your full name, Danny. But you have a very compelling life story, and it's really that life story is what the book is all about. So, and the book is called Scar Tissue. So, why
Mhm.
don't you tell us a little bit about your experience, life experience, and the health issues, challenges that you faced, and how you overcame, and so on. So, go ahead and give us a little bit of rundown about your life.
Sure. Thank you so much. I like to say I'm the husband to one fantabulous wife, the father to three amazing kids, but also the survivor of eight heart surgeries. There's a quote that I love by Richard Paul Evans that says, usually gifts, life's greatest gifts come wrapped up in adversity. And that has proven to be true in my own life. I've had heart operations at 18 months old, 11 months old, 8 years old, 12, 13, 14, and then again at 40 years old. And so my book that I released, Scar Tissue, is really my story, my memoir of what I call my open heart journey.
Well, it's an amazing story. I've read it cover to cover, and I found it just compelling. And it's not just sort of the challenges that that you faced health-wise, but I think so much that encouraged me about your story was the well, that overcoming spirit, that
Mhm.
uh, ability to take these things, what life dealt you, you might say, and overcome and go beyond. And in so doing, your faith is a large part, plays a large part in all that. And um, one of the questions I have for you is why did you feel it was important to tell your story in book form? Why put it out there? Some people have experiences like yours and
Mhm.
keep them largely to themselves or those close around them, but you felt it was important to for the world to know, kind of what you went through. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. It doesn't sound very nice to say it this way, but life really does involve a lot of suffering. And as I've gone through life, suffering is a human universal. Everybody, to some degree, to varying degrees, will suffer. And I've always held on to the belief that there is purpose in our suffering. And so, really, I was challenged to write, really by a friend of mine. We went on a walk together and we were discussing some ideas. He was thinking about writing a book, and he says, I just wanted to bounce some ideas off of you. And so, after a couple hours of just mostly listening, he turned to me and said, would you ever write your story?
Mm.
And it really caught me off guard. And my first thought was, no, I'm too young. But it wasn't so much that I got the idea got me.
Ah.
And so that night I went home and said, well, maybe I'll just scribble a few notes down of what it could be. And I had about 12 pages of notes. And it was at that point I realized I need to write. And usually there's two ways I know that. I get very excited and then right on the heels of that, absolute fear. And that fear was telling me, you can't write. You don't know the first thing about doing this. But once I felt that and I knew I was being challenged to step outside my comfort zone, I knew I had to write.
Hey, that's I think for writers, the writers among us, or those who are maybe contemplating writing, I think those are good remarks, good thoughts in terms of yeah, that writing experience is a frightening experience,
Mhm.
and um, especially for first-time writers, or who want to put that the life story or that major publication, their first book or major article out there. Hey, it's a bit of an intimidating process, and can you do it? And hey, but you did. You pushed
Yeah,
through.
it seems kind of silly looking back to say this, but at the time I thought, well, what do I really have to say? And in just even writing ideas down, I realized, well, having so many surgeries and having to face death at multiple times, I did have a unique perspective. And that really hit home about why I needed to write when I came across a quote by Brené Brown. I love collecting quotes,
You
but
certainly do. I notice them in your books all the time. And frankly, I've given out a few of your books to others, and that's the first thing they come back with. Hey, he has some really great quotes in there. That, those sort of life statements, you might say, or that when I say life statements, I mean statements that can change your life, that can really
yeah,
change the direction of how you approach life, how you approach problems, and so on. And so simply for the quotes, your book is great, but the story is even more compelling. So anyway, go ahead with your thought.
yeah, it was something I read by her that really cemented in my mind why we suffer and why we need to share our stories. And that was simply um, one day you will tell your story about how you've overcome what you're going through now, and that will become part of someone else's survival guide.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
And that hit me. I was deeply impacted by that. And I realized I have to write because somebody somewhere is going to read this and they're going to need to hear what I have to say.
hey, that's a great way to look at it. Okay, and I think if we have that sense of we're not writing it for ourselves, we're writing
No.
it for somebody else, that reader out there who needs what we're sharing, what our story, our experience, our life journey in some way. So that's really impactful. So what, I mean, this is a story about heart surgery or heart
Mhm.
difficulties. What was or who, I might say, who's your intended audience here? Because I think readers might say, oh, well, why would I get this book? What was your thought on who you wanted to reach?
I think anyone facing adversity would benefit from reading this. I grew up in a largely Christian home. My background is Christian, but I did not write this to other Christians. It is for other Christians, but I've had atheists and Buddhists tell me, I really got a lot out of your story. So a lot of what I share is descriptive in that this is what I grew up and this is how I grew up and this is how I chose to look at my circumstance. But it's not prescriptive, meaning this is what the reader has to do or has to take away. And I didn't really want to preach to the choir, so to speak. My aim was if you are facing a difficulty, something that requires resilience or an obstacle you need to overcome, I may have some things that can help you on your journey as well.
I think that certainly came across in the book. I know it wasn't, as I was reading through it, it wasn't preachy in any way, but the story itself really drew me in, made me want to read more. What's the outcome going to be here? And yet your faith really shines through. And there are various times when, I'll just call it the miracle working power of God seemed to be there and answered
Yeah.
prayer and different things like that. And you're fairly upfront about that, but it's done in such a way that it can easily be a great, the book itself can be a great gift or help to anyone, frankly. It has that broad human appeal, is what I see.
That was the goal when I was writing is I
Okay.
had specific people in mind who would never step foot in a church and other people who had grown up in church. And my goal was this book needs to reach both of them.
I I kind of like that thought. I know in my first book, okay, The Soldier Who Killed a King, that was exactly my approach. It was
Mhm.
the story of the centurion who was really not a Christian believer or a Jewish believer or anything like that. And I thought, I really want to write a story that sort of transcends, goes beyond that, and that people who don't even know the story of the crucifixion, resurrection, that Easter count, that you know, they'll see the reality of it. They'll
Mhm.
be drawn into to the drama of it. So that was my goal, and I think you've done that so well with your own story. We're simply drawn into that personal account and that life experience that you simply hey, this is what you went through, and
Yeah.
it wasn't an easy thing. And I think we've all faced some difficulties in our life, but you faced some huge challenges and overcome, and I think that's so important. What do you want readers then to take away? If you're going to say, okay, well, this is what I want them to take away from reading Scar Tissue, your book, what would that be?
I think the main thing for me, there is purpose in our suffering.
Hmm.
And it's easy to say that. It's harder to see it when you're going through it. And I think the most human question we ask sometimes is why? Why is this happening to me? Why me, God? Why not somebody else? And I tried to wrestle with that a little bit in my book, but the conclusion I'm kind of settling on is that you will never get a satisfactory answer to the why me question. But if I can assume that there's purpose and reason to the things that we face, to the adversity that we have to overcome, then I start asking, what?
Hmm.
What is this teaching me? Because if I assume there's a reason, there's something to be learned in it. And that's not an easy shift to make. And with all of my surgeries, I've stopped saying, God, why me? But I've said, okay, what can I learn from this? And part of that learning process for me was you need to share your story because others need to learn. And so that has been a tremendous help to me is just focusing on what?
Yeah,
What
instead
can
of
I
the why.
learn?
Yeah,
What is
that
this
that why
teaching me?
question is so common. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know that. Well, you know my story to some extent because we've talked about it. Because I've
Hmm.
personally had open heart surgery as well with valve issues similar to yours. And and uh, and hey, the first question is why is this happening to me? It's
Yep.
just so natural to think that, and in transitioning to that, well, what can I learn from this? What are you trying to teach me in this moment? How can this help me? How can I help others through similar problems? Uh, Going to that next step and getting off the why, I think is really helpful. Yeah, that's excellent. So
Yeah.
that's sort of part of your purpose in the writing, or what you want readers to take away.
Yeah. Focus on the what is this teaching me? And then in all of these situations, just absolutely refuse to see yourself as a victim. We have all been victimized in some degree where
Yes.
think we have been treated unfairly, but don't see yourself as a victim. And I think the biggest antidote to that is just focus on gratitude. What can you be thankful for in any given situation?
That's you've hit the nail on the head so much there because I think uh, as I was reading through the book and
Mhm.
I just have to say to anyone listening to this, this is a tremendous book. I just really loved it because for me, it hit home at so many places where I realized, yeah, I need to have that thankful heart. Yes, I need, the renovation that needs to be completed in my own heart. I found that place of, hey, I could identify with that in your experience and in the way you wrote it. Okay, so I know those who are listening to this might say, "Well, why would I get that book?" I just really want to challenge all of you. It's a book that will change your perspective and broaden it and give you what I think really, and I'm sure you would agree, Danny, that sort of uh, I'm going to use the word godly, because that's the only thing that can come to mind right now. Sort of that right perspective, rather than seeing, I'm suffering, therefore this must be a cruel God, creating all this problems in my life. Okay, because that's almost our natural reflex,
Yeah.
rather than okay. He's given me life, this God, this creator. I just want to serve him. How can I take these difficulties that I've been handed and you might say make lemonade out of the lemons, or all those little expressions that maybe sound trite, and there's nothing trite about your experience. I don't want to say that, but so much of life is overcoming problems. And
Hmm.
in your book, Scar Tissue, I think you've hit on something that's so fundamental to the human experience, that I think I just really want to say everyone should get a copy of your book. I love it. Okay,
Thank you. Thank you
Danny,
for
I
your kind
appreciate
words.
you taking the time to be with us today. God bless you, and to our readers, I'll maybe put a post on our link that you could see the actual title of the book, Scar Tissue by Danny Covey. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Bye now.